Being wealthy and a Christian isn't what most people think it is. You see, you assume that more money just means more of the same problems, but that's like saying being a surgeon is the same thing as being a medical student, just with more tools. It's not. It is completely different. The weight, the decisions, the isolation, the misunderstandings, nobody prepares you for what wealth actually costs, especially when you are like me and you were raised in a household that never made more than 40K in a single year. People who couldn't think about what was going to be paid for next month, not to mention next year or 10 years or a legacy or a dynasty. And so when you are that first generation millionaire, which I know you're here because you're doing recon for your own assignment, you want to either know what it's like or you're living in it right now and you want to know if you're alone. And so I'm going to break this down. And the point of this video is not to complain, not at all. I'm so grateful for where God has me. But there are things that I wish somebody told me beforehand because you will not get the money without the responsibility. The two are sides of the same coin. And so if you are not prepared, then you will be caught off guard. And the things that I'm going to tell you are things that I wish somebody had told me so that I wouldn't have been so surprised when they actually happened. Because in wealthy families, these are the conversations that are happening right now where they're able to pass this down to their children and to the people in the family so that they can understand how to manage it. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you how I went from thinking that wealth was going to solve all of my problems to having completely different ones that nobody prepares you for. And I'm going to pull back the veil so that you can avoid making some of the mistakes that I had to learn the hard way. So the first is the calling trap. And I have an entirely separate video on this that I'll link in the description. But nobody tells you that you can't leave your calling to serve tables anymore. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in that video, I go into more depth with it, but in short, there's a passage in scripture where the Pharisees are calling out the disciples because they're like, hey, the widows aren't being fed. And they're like, you should go and feed the widows, right? And the disciples are like, well, no, why would I leave? Why would I stop teaching the word of God in order to go and wait tables? And you see, this is the thing that I love about this passage because serving and feeding widows is a good thing. You see, and that's when we see that the enemy of God is not always bad. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not something that looks inherently sinful. It's just something that is misaligned and it's not what you should be doing. You see, walking is not bad unless, of course, you are an eye. If you are an eye and you're trying to do the work of a foot, then you are out of place. And so walking for you is bad. But the reason why this becomes something that most people don't get until they're in the situation is because most people don't have standards for their stewardship. They don't have guardrails and boundaries for their calling and their assignment. And so people just spread out. And instead of everybody being in where their gifting has them, you have one person wearing 17 different hats and they expect you to do the same thing too. And so there was a month where at church, we were being asked to serve in a specific way and to help to tear down and take up and do all these things. And during that same time that we would be coming to help set up and take down for events, we could be generating tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars that would fund not only those events, but the church building and the parking lot and the missionaries and all of these other things. And so it's not that set up and takedown was bad. It's that it was not wise stewardship of the time that we had. You see, the more that you have to steward, the more responsibility you have, the stakes aren't the same. So then every hour of my time has now a higher price tag that people can't see. And then not to mention, you try to explain that to someone and they're going to think that you believe you're better than them or that you're more important than them. Because in today's church, we have lost all sense of a functional hierarchy. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you see, we are all equal in value and dignity and worth. But as far as utility in what we do, a college student's time isn't equally as valuable as a brain surgeon. That's just simply not true. And it doesn't mean they're not both loved and valuable before the sight of God, but it does mean that that brain surgeon is going to have to be much more diligent about if he stays up at night, about if he has a drink before he goes into work, whereas the college student can stay up all night with very little consequence other than maybe a personal grade failing, whereas the brain surgeon would have someone's life in his hands. And so when those stakes are different and somebody is asking you to do something that looks good, it can be so difficult if you don't know and expect it coming to be confident in your no. And that's something that you will learn if you haven't yet, is that your no is more sacred than your yes. That what you say no to is far more important than even the things that you say yes to, because that establishes your standards and your boundaries. You see, Abraham didn't personally tend to all of his flocks. He had servants that were managing his wealth so that he could focus on his calling. You see, Genesis 13:2 says Abraham had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and in gold. And although that was the case, it didn't say that he was the one physically out there tending to all of the livestock. You see, wealthy people in the Bible consistently delegated operations. And you have to understand that there will be responsibilities that you have that other people don't understand. They'll tell you that you're silly for outsourcing. They'll tell you that you're lazy or you're wasteful for hiring a chef or a housekeeper or all of these people that enable you to focus on the thing that only you can do. And you have to be really okay. You're going to hear this word a lot in this video, with being misunderstood, because that's the name of the game. It's the cost of the sauce. It's the price of the pie. All right. And so if you are going to hear, that's why the quote ain't lying when it says it's lonely at the top. And that's because very few people have ever been where you're at, and don't expect them to understand it. And that brings me to the second thing, which is the giving paradox. People think if you really loved God, then you would give more than you do, even if you already give a lot. It will never be enough, because people start to feel entitled. And in one of the podcast episodes in our private podcast, The Queen's Table, which you can look at joining in the description if you're interested, that's where I do much more content like this that really goes deeply into behind the scenes on what it's like to be a Christian with wealth, and my thoughts on things like contentment and ambition, and real stories from instances that have happened with people. But in that, I talk about how when you give, you will actually be surprised the type of responses we'll have. Some people will get envious or jealous. Some people will get insecure. Some people will feel inferior to you, and like everything you give them creates a debt. And some people will feel entitled and like they are owed something from you. And so I talk about in one of those episodes a huge gap that actually comes up that a lot of people don't even know exists, and that giving can cause more problems than it solves. So please, if you want wisdom on that, go check out that in the Queen's Table podcast. But you see, what people don't understand is that if I gave all my money away today, then I would have nothing left to give tomorrow. That wealth isn't a bank account that you empty. It's a machine that you maintain. You see, my business generates over $100,000 a month. And if I liquidated everything and gave away $2, $3, $4 million today, that may look generous. I might get some claps from some people, but then now I can't give to anybody else. Versus maintaining the business means I can give $1 million plus every year for, by the grace of God, the rest of my life. And let's say I live, Lord willing, another 50 years. That's now, instead of a one-time gift of 4 million, a gift of 50 million throughout the entire time that I'm alive. How much more impact is that going to produce for the kingdom of God? But you see, people who are hungry will never understand why you won't let them eat the corn. They think, why, like, we're hungry today. Give me the corn. Like, you have corn, let me eat it because I am hungry. Not understanding that you see the wisdom in planting it, that you see the wisdom of, hey, we could eat it today, but then we're going to starve tomorrow. So we're going to take that L today. We're going to starve today. We're going to go a little hungry. We're going to go forage. We're going to go find some things, but we're not touching that corn because it's needed for a greater purpose. So, you know, when you kill the machine to look generous today, you end up killing generosity forever. And 1 Kings 3:13 says that God gave Solomon both wealth and honor. And Solomon didn't give it all away. He stewarded it for kingdom impact. The temple wasn't built with poverty. And so broke people often give from their lack. And it's not generosity. It's unwise stewardship. There is a wrong way to give, a wrong time to give, a wrong season to give. If you are giving away your bill money, that is not faith. That is foolishness. If you are giving away something that you owe to somebody else, that is not faith. That is foolishness. And I don't mean you stop giving to other people, but you keep spending money on the nonsense that you want to spend money on. I mean, specifically, you should be stewarding your money well. And people think that I'm wrong for having standards for who I give money to. If somebody asks me to borrow money, I don't just give it bluntly. So what are you using it for? And then if you're asking me, especially multiple times, we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to ask you about your financial management. I'm going to ask you, do you need help with the budget? Do you need help with interview skills? Can I get you in touch with our financial person? Because what we want to do is equip people to be able to fish, not to just continue giving them fish. We're not creating a welfare state. We want you to do well and say farewell, okay? So that you can be able to sustain your own life and your own family. And so, but people don't understand that. They think, well, because you have it and it's no sweat off your back, you're not going to notice a couple thousand missing the bank account, but that could change my life. But that's when it goes to the next thing that people don't ever think, which is the power burden. Nobody in a single video that I watched so many videos and the Lord was preparing me for wealth about what it's like and how things change. And nobody mentioned this. And it's that you have invisible power over people's lives, that some days, if you're not trusting in the Lord, if you don't have his peace that surpasses all understanding, I mean, it will keep you up at night. You see, when somebody messages you, a family member, and they're struggling, right? And maybe you have somebody you could give, enough money to. There's a friend that I had that she was struggling financially, and I could have given her enough money to pay for her bills for the entire year, right? And that would have enabled her to be able to go back to school, to be able to at least have some breathing room, look for a better job, do whatever else, right? And even if she never asks, I have to make that decision. And by the grace of God, I have to use wisdom and discernment and steward what he has given me to say, is this the best use of God's money? And then I have to think about her. I have to think, is that going to be good for her? Is that going to remove her incentive to figure out things and to actually learn to do better and grow? Am I going to be moving her out of God's pattern of preparation for her own life by me trying to shortcut it by just giving her money and throwing it at her problems? Because there are many spoiled children who were ruined because of the lack of wisdom of their parents and how to dispense money to them. And so when you can change someone's entire life with a single decision, you could pay off all of their debt. You could fund their dream business. You could rescue their family, even when you choose not to. And the people around you, they know that you could do it and that you're choosing not to do it. Don't ever think that there aren't rooms happening in other conversations about you of people saying what they would do if they were in your position. And some people will be bold enough to tell you to your face. I mentioned that story on the Queen's Table of people who literally said to our face, to my husband and I, well, if I had your type of money, I would be doing XYZ. Why aren't you guys doing that? You could be helping in XYZ way. And the thing is that God didn't give them the money. He gave it to you. Okay. He gave it to you because the Bible says he who is faithful with little, he will give much. And he who is unfaithful with little, that which he has will be taken from him and given to the person who was faithful with much. And so what you got to understand is now, yes, sure, 100%. A broken clock is right twice a day. I understand that. But also, the Bible says that wealth is a crown for the wise. The Bible says that he rewards with his divine distribution plan the faithful with more. Okay. And so if that is the case, if this is a person who does not have wealth and they are trying to advise you on what you should do with your wealth, we can safely assume that they probably haven't been faithful with what they have. And that is the case 100% of the time with the people that I talk to who give us bad money advice, bad giving advice, who have bad expectations around what we should be doing and what stewardship actually looks like for us, are always from people who have no actual experience wisely stewarding money. So you have to consider the source. You see, Satan will use your wealth to make you feel guilty for having boundaries, and other people will try to manipulate it and make you feel bad. Like when you say no or choose not to do something, it means you're failing. You're failing them, you're failing people, you're failing your assignment. And some even Christians will try to make it seem like you're failing God for not being a vending machine, when that would be unwise stewardship. You see, but saying yes to everyone would be saying no to your calling. You have to think about this. God gave you the money for a purpose, which is why you have to be clear on purposes before the money ever touches your hand. That you need to understand, okay, what is this even for? because money isn't the goal in and of itself. You have to do something to create some sort of value to get that money. And so your goal primarily and firstly, preeminently should be to glorify God, right? Provide for your family. And then after, it should be the impact of whatever you're going to do that's going to make that money. And so you should be seeking excellence in that, and the money comes as a byproduct. But you would be silly not to prepare for the responsibility that's going to come with it. Because when you have it, trust me, your phone will start ringing. I'm telling you, I thought this stuff was on movies until my phone started ringing, until I had a family member who did not even have my phone number, who had to get it from other people, that called and asked to borrow $5,000 a week after she found out that my husband and I were doing well. And she didn't know how well. She knew we had bought 200 acres, and I guess she thought, well, they must got enough money to give some to me. And this was a woman who I literally had not even seen, not to mention talked to, in years. And that was not the first story that I have. There are many, many more of people who you will be surprised have audacity. Okay, so you have to have framework to be able to understand how to deal with that. Okay, and so even Jesus didn't heal everyone. That's what you have to think about. Jesus had discernment in his healing and who he helped, okay? Luke 4:25-27 reminds us there were many widows and lepers, but Elijah and Elisha helped specific people. You see supernatural power, you see gifting, ability, gifts from the Lord also come with responsibility. And to do something and to decide and to have a specific purpose means that you have to be exclusionary by definition. That in order to do something, to stay on one path, it means you have to close off others. And so if we know this is where God has us to be on this path, then even this other thing that looks good, we're still not going to go down that route. Because, and what we're going to do, and you may be saying, well, what about if it doesn't get taken care of? I trust that God has other people. It's just like when David, when he was running from Saul's men, and I remember he was just crying out to the Lord, like, oh my gosh, Lord, it's just me, no one else is left. And God is like, I have 10,000 that have not taken a knee to these false gods. Okay, and what does it have to do with this? Well, I know that there are other faithful Christians, that even this channel is helping in the fight to raise up faithful Christians who are going to be faithful in business, who are going to be faithful at their jobs, who are going to be faithful with stewardship and biblical wealth. And that just because something's not my ministry doesn't mean that God is not going to get it taken care of. Because even with Esther, you saw Mordecai told Esther, Mordecai said, Esther, baby girl, you can do it. But even if you don't, God is going to raise up another. And so what you won't succeed by doing is by focusing on the thing that you're not doing. You do what God has assigned you to do faithfully. If you are an eye, it will do you no good to try to function as a shoulder just because the shoulder has some benefits. Sure it does, but God didn't design you to be a shoulder. And all that means is now that you're out of place and you're out of order. And so now you aren't fully functioning in. And so now the body can't see. And that's because you are out of alignment and out of position. So be very mindful with not letting yourself feel guilty about that and understanding that that is a part of your stewardship. Now, the next thing that nobody talks about is the wisdom of withholding. All right. So sometimes this will sound heartless, but giving someone life-changing money would be the worst thing for them. We see this with lottery winners all the time. Okay. You know, there was a family member that I gave money to, and we wiped it clean. They ended up in the hospital, and we just wanted for them to be able to focus on recovering, getting better, and not paying us back. And so we, and they're not believers. So we were preaching the gospel to them, and we, use it as an example of saying, hey, the Lord wiped our debts free. And, we want to be able to do that for you with this money and just take it off you and your wife's shoulders. And then the next month, he ended up asking for more money than he had borrowed. And the balance he had was from 2 other times that he had borrowed stacked up. And it was in that moment where I'm like, this is something that we're not going to do and that we can't keep doing. And in fact, when you think about the prodigal son, what was it that made the prodigal son come back home? Was it because his dad kept sending him money? No. In fact, if his dad would have kept sending him money, if he would have had a well-meaning friend who was able to pay stuff for him and take care of him and give him a 10 spot and a 20 spot here and there so he can still go to McDonald's and eat out, well, he probably would have taken much longer to actually repent and to come back home to his father. But what happened is he found himself eating in a pig trough, okay? He was eating with the pigs, okay? And when he was eating with those pigs, he said, hold on a second. The servants at my father's house eat better than I'm eating right now. I can go back to my daddy's house and be a servant and live better than I'm living right now. And why am I sharing this story? Because sometimes we've got to let people get to their pig season. Okay, it's to get to their prodigal season, all right? And a lot of people are stuck in their post pig because somebody is keeping them afloat, because somebody isn't letting them hit rock bottom, because somebody feels you care more about you being spiritual than them actually spiritually growing, because that's what it is. You care more about you feeling good than you doing good. And that's what you have to be real with is this actually helping them, or is this releasing some of the tension? Do I not want people to accuse me of being unkind or not giving? Do I not want people to accuse me of not being godly, even though I know what I'm doing is in line with what God has told me to do? But I'm that feeling misunderstood. Then the people, they're making accusations or saying stuff to me, it's not true. I have to prove to them that I'm this generous person. And I have to do that by being generous in this specific way that makes other people feel comfortable. That's not actually caring about people. That is people pleasing. And I know because I was there at one point where I realized that stuff that I was doing and not doing I was so busy trying to protect my image, because I had always been known as somebody who was really relatable, super down to earth. Oh, Danielle, you can talk about anything, da, da, da. And the more money we started to make, the less relatable I became. And the more people started, like I had a friend recently that I met, and she was the first friend that I had tried to make. It didn't work out. And I talk about that on the Queen's Table. But it ended very badly. And it was shortly after she found out that I was a millionaire. And no, I didn't just say, hey girl, we got millions. But it came up just casually in a conversation because we had gotten offered to do some casting for a TV show about young millionaires. And I was telling her about the opportunity, and she's like, oh, what's the TV show about? And I said, young millionaires. And she goes, oh, wait, so you guys are millionaires? And it just slipped my mind, because to me, it's just life, right? But then later, a few days later, we had a different conversation. And the first thing she says, and I tell the full story on the Queen's Table, the first thing she says is, well, God doesn't care about just because people make a lot of money and blah, blah, blah. And I say all this to say, like, if she would have called me a few months earlier, I would have stayed. I would have defended myself. I would have wanted to show her I'm not like those other rich people who are just self-absorbed and greedy. And I'm like, I'm the same friend that you've had for the last 2 or 3 months. And before you knew how much I made, you didn't think anything differently of me. But you got to understand, people got money problems. People have issues with what they believe to be true about wealthy people that they're going to project onto you. And it just comes to the territory. And you can spend your time trying to defend yourself, trying to explain your reasons. But every single second you spend doing that is 1 second less that you are not actually working towards your calling. And so you are so busy arguing with somebody about your blueprints that you're not getting anything built. And I'm going to save you some time. They're not going to get it. It's not a matter of understanding. Let me explain something to you that changed my life. In the book called The Weight of Glory by C.S. Lewis, if you want to read it, it has some other good stuff in there. He talks about this theory of transposition. The theory of transposition means that when you are translating something higher from a higher form to a lower form, anything, that something's going to be lost when you do it, right? And so imagine me trying to explain an orchestra and the different sections and all the music and all the crescendos and the different overlapping parts and the different sections playing different things, but it all comes together. And you've never heard any music, but I'm going to explain to you how an orchestra sounds, and I'm going to hum, and I'm going to go, and you're going to go, okay, wow, that's an orchestra. You're going to give me the mom clap. You're going to say, oh, good job, sweetie. That's an orchestra. You're going to probably walk away and be like, that was weird. But you're not going to get it, right? Because even if I can get the melody just right, me with my one voice is never going to be able to fully explain the complexity of the multi-part orchestration of an orchestra, because you don't have any frame of reference for it. You've never heard what violins and, I don't know if all these instruments in an orchestra, but violins and flutes and trumpets and all of these things sound like, much less all of them playing at the same time. And this is exactly what happens when you try to explain as a queen to someone who is a farmer. And I don't mean it in a bad way. We need queens, we need farmers, we need knights, we need warriors, we need poets. And again, it's just because you have to understand we are in a society that is extremely equity focused, equality focused, and we don't even know what those words mean on a biblical basis. People use them wrong all the time. And people just think that everyone is the same, but we are not. When you look at the parable of the talents, he gave 1, 5, 10. That inequality, that lack of having the same thing, the same level of talent, skills, gifting is not a bug. It's a feature. It's God's design. We're not all designed to do the same thing. And what a terribly boring world it would be if it did. But because of that, you're going to have to understand that people aren't going to understand, and that it's not a matter of you explaining better. It's like trying to explain to someone who's on the first floor what it looks like on the 16th. They don't have the ability to even think about perspective from that level because they've never been to it. If you've ever heard of Plato's cave allegory, which again, I talk about a lot of this in depth on the Queen's Table, but he talks about this and, how people are chained up and, you're all in chains and you're looking at the wall and you're facing a wall and there are these shadows that you see and there's a shadow contest. And then basically, and this is a very shortened version, you get free and then you see that the things you're looking at on the wall that you thought were real are just shadows of something else. And you get out of the cave and then you go outside and you're like, wait a second, there's an entirely new world out here. And there are stars and you see trees and you learn about all this stuff and you go back down to people in the cave. You say, hey guys, those things on the wall, those are called shadows and they're projected by this thing called fire. And we go out of the cave, there's this entirely new world out here and blah, blah, blah. And they're going to look at you like you're crazy. And it doesn't matter how well you explain it because they've never been outside the cave. They won't get it. And I'm spending so much time here because I wasted so much time here. And if this extra 2 minutes convinces a single person to stop trying to explain themselves, I know God brought somebody to this video right here, right now. And if this is for you, you can let me know in the comments. But because you are wasting your time wanting people to come with you, they can't come. It's not for them. It's not for them. You can't bring them along. You can't drag them. The best thing you can do is be faithful to what you are doing. And if there's any chance they will come, it won't be because you explain it to them or because of compulsion. It'll be because they're inspired by you. And the thing you're trying to force them to get now, they will be asking to understand once they see you having the fruit and get further along. And if they have any chance, there are some people who will never come. And that's okay. Because everybody doesn't need to be everywhere. Everybody just needs to be where God will have for them to be, okay? And so when it comes to back to that point of just giving and money and that wisdom of withholding, you have to remember that money doesn't solve character problems. It exposes them. And so sometimes love looks like letting people struggle through what will ultimately make them stronger. And some people might say, well, who are you to be able to decide whether or not a person should have the money or not, whether they should struggle or not? Well, you're the person who God ordained and made a trustee to be able to do that when he gave you the money. And so you got to trust that the wisdom that God gave you to get to this point, it says that he will give it freely to those who ask, right? That he will give as much wisdom as we want. And so we trust God and steward what he has given with us wisely, but stewardship comes with the job. So don't be scared of it. All right. So, when you see this though, it's again, the side that nobody talks about, those decisions of when you're explaining, when you're sitting on millions, but watching someone struggle with something that you could fix with what would be equivalent to pocket change. And people will assume that you are cruel for doing that, even if you know that this is a person who has repeatedly made bad financial decisions, has shown themselves to be an unjust steward. And I literally had someone tell me recently that I shouldn't have standards for people who we lend to and I should lend to anybody. And I'm like, no, this is God's money. I'm not giving God's money out to just anybody for anything. And the same way banks have standards on who they give money to, we are not going to be giving out money without any standards or either, because that would be unwise stewardship on our part. Okay. So a poverty mindset is one that says help everyone, but a wealth mindset says help strategically. And God would call that wisdom. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says, if anyone is not willing to work, let them not eat. You see, even Paul, who was certainly full of compassion, understood that rescue without responsibility creates dependency, which again, it doesn't help them. If anything, it maybe helps you feel better, but it doesn't actually help them do better. Now, this is a transformation reality. is that nobody prepares you for the fact that you will be a completely different person once you get there. You see, it's the growth process. It's like an apple sprout has to mature into a fully grown tree in order to hold the fruit. The change is required to steward the wealth, means you will not be the same way or think the same way that you're thinking at the beginning. You will not recognize you. There will be things that you didn't understand then, like so much stuff that I didn't get. When I tell you guys, me and my husband had so many conversations, and even before I was married, about like what I would do once I got money and like giving, and like I'll take my family on these trips and da 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 da. Oh my gosh, I'm in the process of about to take my family trip right now. I'm telling you, we'll never do it again. We'll never do it again. Not that, my God, just trying to take the big family trip. And it has just been an absolute mess. And we're paying for it. And just so many things happen. I'll probably do a separate Queen's Table episode on that. Give you guys the juice on that so you can learn from what the Lord is teaching me. But it's where you get wisdom and you realize why people do things. I remember saying I would never get a big fancy car. It's a waste of money. And then I learned about tax write-offs. Okay, I learned that if I don't spend my money, the government gonna spend it for me. And I would much rather spend my money than have the government spending it on things that I don't support, that are going against God and all of this other stuff. And so there are things about where I would live, about the things that I prefer, about my values. I loved cooking, and now we have a chef. I never would have thought that I would have given that up. But it's like, I understand that as much as I enjoy cooking and I can still do it when I want to do it, but having to do it regularly and still not wanting to sacrifice those quality home cooked meals that are made and we know what ingredients are going into it, by the grace of God, we were able to get a chef. And that frees up so much time and energy and brain space for me that I don't have to think about that anymore. And I can think about this thing that God has called me to do while still making sure my household is being taken care of. And so you're going to find yourself doing the exact things that you used to judge wealthy people for. And you're going to understand why. You're going to understand why you're hiring help instead of everything being done by yourself. You're going to choose first class, even when maybe before you would have said it's a waste of money, because now your time is worth more than the upgrade cost. You're going to say no to good opportunities because you see better ones. You're not going to allow people to pick your brain or just stay on the phone with you for a couple hours. And what's that big of a deal? Her time isn't even important than mine. And all of these other things. You're going to start making decisions based on what's the return on investment. You're going to start paying for convenience in ways that you never thought, things that you thought were wasteful, like staying at hotels that are going to bring your bags up or give you early check-in or late checkout, like things that you just thought were kind of ridiculous or unnecessary. You end up realizing once you get to different levels why those things were occurring in the first place. And just prepare to eat some slices of humble pie, because I guarantee you there will be a lot that you didn't get. Like, again, with giving, I didn't get why wealthy people, number one, didn't give more. Just frankly, a lot of the wealthy people that I had known of were not taking care of a lot of things for their family. In fact, one of the prominent wealthy people that I studied growing up, he said that he had a rule with his family. They could ask him for money one time in their entire life. And he said, and after that, nothing else. And so what it requires them to do is to be very strategic and intentional and say, is this the only time that I'm going to choose? Is this my one thing? Is this important enough for it to be the one thing? And I'm not saying that that's what everybody should do. But the point is, I didn't understand that. I'm like, if you had it, why wouldn't you give it? If you could bring your friends along, why wouldn't you pay for them, right? If you want them to come and enjoy it with you. And then you experience the insecurity, you experience the jealousy, you experience the entitlement, you experience how it changes the very dynamic of the relationship. You experience people's lack of gratitude and inability to just even respond to text messages. It's just, I can't talk too much on that because I have a strict rule against going into something until the Lord has finished teaching me the lesson. And I'm in the middle of that storm right now with that trip. But it's just one of those things where you start to see things differently. But you have to remember, if you wanted the same things then that you want now, it would be easy to get them. But you don't want those things anymore because now you're aware of options that you never even knew existed. And so 1 Kings 10:7 says that Solomon said, indeed, not even half was told to me. In wisdom and wealth, you have far exceeded what I have heard. And so Solomon had far exceeded that. And, wealth expands your own vision of what's possible. Now, this is just part one. There is a lot more. So if you want to know more things of the real and the dark side, what happens with bragging and how what you do can trigger other people, misunderstanding, and how friendships can fracture, and if it's really worth it. Comment below if you want part two. And if you want more like this is the exact type of content that I give every single week for free. All you got to do is sign up for the podcast below for the Queen's Table. It is my open journal and diary to the people and women who want to and have big callings on their life and want to be prepared for walking in it, or maybe you're in it right now and you don't want to walk alone. Now, for those of you who ask, which I get a comment on every video, what do you do? How do you actually make over $100,000 a month working 5 hours a week? Well, I do that through monetizing my skills and my knowledge and what God has given me and teaching that to other people through online courses. And I get to help people do that, from skills of teaching interview skills to social media to dog training to weight loss, whatever it is, whatever transformation God has taught you and brought you through. I can help you teach that to other people and to be able to get paid 20, 30, 50. We have students, a student just texted us or emailed us last week that she's consistently making 30K a month. And that is something that we can see all the time. And so if you want to learn how to get started, you can check out the free training I have below that goes over the 3 simple steps to be able to create a course to replace your income and finally come home, even if you're a beginner and have no experience and don't feel like you're an expert at all. So if you're ready to get started with that, I can see you in the training. And again, let me know if you guys want part 2. If you like content like this, maybe I will keep more of it up here on YouTube. So please thumbs up if you enjoyed it. What was most surprising to you? Leave it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.